When my eyes opened, I was back in the car. The world returned to me with the sting of a slap across my face, and for a moment, I was disoriented. Then the voice of my husband Mark filled the small space, his words a furious roar. "You stupid woman! Pull the car over! Just because you have a driver's license doesn't mean you know everything. I'm telling you, I could drive this road better than you, even if I'd never been behind a wheel in my life." His breath, a toxic cloud of stale cigarettes and cheap alcohol, washed over me. I was still reeling from the blow when a droplet of his spit landed on my cheek. In that instant, everything came flooding back. The memories of my previous life, or rather the end of it, crashed into me like a tidal wave. I remembered this exact moment. Mark trying to wrench the steering wheel from my hands on this treacherous mountain road. I remembered the agony of what came next. Being beaten by my own children, then dragged behind the moving car by my husband, until the life faded from my body. A profound, bone-deep shiver coursed through me. I was reborn. Reborn into the very day my family had destroyed me. This time, I would not fight him. Without another word, I steered the car to the side of the winding road and brought it to a halt. My hands fell away from the wheel. "You're right, Mark," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Men are just naturally better with things like this. You should be the one to drive." With those words, I unbuckled my seatbelt and began to open my door. A self-satisfied smirk spread across Mark's face. "See? If you'd just done that in the first place, none of this would have happened." He didn't even bother to get out and walk around. Instead, he started to clumsily climb over the center console, moving from the passenger seat into the driver's seat with awkward, jerky movements. From the back seat, my daughter Chloe muttered just loud enough for me to hear. "If you had just listened to Dad earlier, he wouldn't have had to hit you." My son, Dylan, let out an impatient sigh, his eyes rolling dramatically. "Mom, can you just get back in the car? This drive is only supposed to take an hour, and you've already stretched it into 2?" It was a gray, miserable day with a steady drizzle making the world outside look blurry and unwelcoming. As I stood by the side of the car, the rain began to soak through my thin jacket. Not one of them, not my husband, not my son, not my daughter, made any move to offer me an umbrella. They simply stared at me through the car windows, their faces etched with resentment. I could understand it from Mark. He was a man addicted to gambling, whose primary form of communication was through his fists. But to receive such coldness from the 2 children I had carried, birthed, and raised, it felt as though the last flickering ember of warmth in my heart was finally extinguished. They were my flesh and blood, but if this was how they treated me, they were nothing more than strangers, monsters in familiar skin. I took a deep, cleansing breath of the damp mountain air and made my choice. "I'm not coming," I announced. "You 3 can go on without me." At my words, Mark slammed his fist down on the steering wheel, causing the horn to blare twice in the quiet wilderness. He exploded in a fresh wave of anger. "Sarah, what the hell is wrong with you now? Are you deliberately trying to make me angry?" Chloe's face, a mask of teenage annoyance, scowled at me. While adjusting the clothes on a small stuffed animal, she shot me a look filled with disdain. "Mom, just stop it. Dad already said he was sorry, so why are you still acting like this? You're being such a bitter old woman. It's no wonder Dad hits you all the time. You completely ask for it." Dylan, meanwhile, had scrambled into the front passenger seat. He fiddled with the car's central touchscreen for a moment, and I heard the click as he locked all the doors. "If she doesn't want to get in, then let her stay here." "It's not like we're begging her to come," he said dismissively. "Dad, let's just go. We're going to make Grandma and Grandpa wait." Hearing his words sent a chill through me, even though I had already resolved to cut them out of my life. It was the beginning of summer vacation, and for weeks, Dylan and Chloe had been pleading with me to take them to see their grandparents who lived deep in these mountains. My clothing store was incredibly busy, and I simply couldn't find the time to get away. Mark had offered to take them, but he didn't know how to drive and was far too cheap to hire car service for the long trip into the countryside. When he realized I wasn't going to be their personal chauffeur, he had beaten me. It was only after my children cried and begged me that I reluctantly reconciled with Mark and agreed to make the drive. Now, only halfway to our destination, they seemed to have conveniently forgotten the desperation with which they had pleaded. "I said I'm not going," I repeated, my voice firm. "If you 3 want to go, then go." I drew my thin coat more tightly around my shoulders and began to walk back in the direction of the last rest stop we had passed. The asphalt was slick and treacherous from the rain. Even with my decade of driving experience, I would have been cautious on this steep, winding pass. But since Mark was so brimming with confidence, I would let him have his chance. If something terrible were to happen, it would have absolutely nothing to do with me. I hadn't expected him to follow. I had only taken a couple of steps when I heard a car door slam open behind me. Mark, now wearing a hastily thrown-on raincoat, was charging toward me. "Sarah, you're really pushing your luck today, aren't you?" His face was red with fury as he swung his fist at my face. I was prepared this time. After years of his abuse, I knew his patterns. He always led with his left hook. I sidestepped his clumsy attack, letting his fist whistle through the empty air where my head had been. Then, I channeled all my strength into my right arm and punched him directly in the eye. Years of lifting and carrying heavy boxes of inventory from my store had given me more strength than he knew. The impact sent him stumbling backward, clutching his face in shock and pain. "You fucking bitch! You actually hit me!" He was right. I had hit him. My right hand was trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline. In 2 lifetimes, this was the first time I had ever fought back. So this was how it felt to be the one, inflicting the pain. It was strangely exhilarating. No wonder Mark resorted to violence whenever he was displeased. It was a potent, intoxicating feeling. Watching him yelp and stagger around, I sneered inwardly. He couldn't even handle a single punch. I remembered the time he had broken my leg with a wooden plank, and I had endured the pain without making a sound. On impulse, I stuck my foot out and tripped him. I watched with a grim satisfaction as he tumbled into a muddy ditch by the side of the road. I let out a short, sharp laugh and continued walking. "Dad!" I heard the sound of 2 car doors slamming. My son and daughter must have gotten out of the car. I didn't turn around. If they wanted to follow their father to their doom, that was their choice. Just as the thought crossed my mind, a sharp, blinding pain exploded at the back of my head. I spun around, disoriented, to see Dylan standing there, a badminton racket clutched in his hands. I clutched my wounded head with one hand, and with the other, I swung out and slapped him hard across the face. "Dylan, are you insane? Are you trying to kill me, you little monster?" The force of the slap seemed to snap him out of his rage. He looked stunned, and the racket slipped from his grasp, clattering onto the wet pavement. I had never, not once in his entire life, laid a hand on him. No matter how difficult he had been, I had always spoiled him, given him everything he ever wanted. And this was how he repaid me. A flicker of guilt crossed his face. "Mom, You what?" Chloe shrieked, rushing forward. She snatched the fallen badminton racket from the ground and swung it at my head with all her might. "So, what if we hit you? You're a worthless woman who deserves it. How dare you hit my dad?" I managed to dodge the first swing, but Dylan lunged at me, wrapping his arms around my body and holding me in place. Thump, thump, thump. I lost count of how many times the racket connected with my skull. In my peripheral vision, I saw the shaft of the racket finally splinter and break. My head was throbbing with an excruciating pain, and a warm, sticky liquid, a mixture of rain and my own blood, streamed down my face. When Mark used to beat me, they had never once tried to stop him. But the very first time I defended myself, they turned on me like a pack of wolves. A deep, bitter regret washed over me once more. I had brought these 2 monsters into the world. This was all feeling terrifyingly similar to how my previous life had ended. The cold fear of death crept over me again. I collapsed to my knees with a thud. "Don't hit me anymore," I begged, my voice a broken whisper. "Please. I know I was wrong." The 2 of them exchanged a look, and I saw a triumphant gleam in their eyes. It was the same look Mark always gave me when I was forced to beg for his mercy. "What were you wrong about?" they asked in perfect unison. My fingers dug into the soft mud of the roadside. Their question was also identical to the one Mark always asked. How had I been so blind to their cruelty for all these years? I took a shaky breath. "I was wrong to hit your father," I said, forcing the words out. "I was wrong to throw a tantrum and refuse to get in the car." "That's better," Chloe said, lowering the broken racket. "Now apologize to Dad and get back in the car." Gritting my teeth, I lowered my head in Mark's direction. "I'm sorry, honey. I was wrong." Mark was accustomed to this routine. He walked over and kicked me lightly. Get your worthless self back in the car. The violence ceased. I climbed back into the car, forcing a placating smile onto my face for Mark. Honey, do you want me to show you how to drive it first? Hmm. A look of displeasure darkened his features. His pride was a fragile and dangerous thing. I remembered the time I tried to divorce him. He had threatened me, saying that a divorce would be too humiliating for him and that if I dared to leave, he would kill me and both of our children. It was for their sake that I had endured his cruelty for so many years. Sensing his rising anger, I quickly changed my approach. Honey, it's not that I don't think you can do it. I just think that with the rain making the roads so slippery, it might be helpful if you watch how I handle it first. It could help you drive even more effectively. This explanation seemed to satisfy his ego. The car was a manual transmission. I went through the motions for Mark, but I deliberately gave him incorrect information. I showed him how to use his left foot for both the clutch and the brake pedals. You think I need to learn this? He scoffed. You women are just overly cautious cowards. He let out a derisive snort, insisting that he had already figured it all out. He pushed me aside and settled himself back into the driver's seat. The very moment he started to press the clutch, I clutched my stomach dramatically. I have to use the bathroom. I really need to get out. God damn it, you're always full of problems, Mark snarled, raising his hand as if to strike me again. My son spoke up impatiently. Just let her go, Dad. You know how to drive now, right? My daughter chimed in from the back. Yeah, Dad. What if she has an accident in the car? That would be so disgusting. Mark seemed to agree with that and waved his hand dismissively, telling me to get lost. Without another word, I grabbed a raincoat from the back, threw it on, and climbed out of the car. I took several steps back as the vehicle began to lurch forward. I watched as it swerved and bucked wildly up the narrow, winding mountain pass. Standing on the side of the road, I smiled. Then I turned and started walking back down the mountain. The wound on my head throbbed painfully, but I felt a sense of relief I hadn't experienced in years. When I finally made it back to the vicinity of the rest stop, I found that I had cell phone service again. I pulled out my phone, called for a ride-sharing service, and directed the driver to take me to the county hospital. The doctor who examined me was visibly shocked by the extent of my injuries. You need to be admitted for observation, he said sternly. I nodded in agreement, and after they had cleaned and bandaged my head, I checked myself in. By the time I was settled in a hospital bed, night had fallen. I turned on my phone, intending to call Mark and see what had become of them. But as the screen illuminated, a breaking local news alert immediately caught my attention. Breaking, landslide on Mountain Pass Road, multiple vehicles trapped. I clicked on the notification and was taken to a live news broadcast from the scene. The video showed a massive mudslide that had completely washed away a large section of the mountain road. There, crushed beneath an enormous boulder, was a familiar black SUV, with only its rear half visible. Rescue workers were using heavy machinery to try and pry open the doors. According to eyewitness reports, 3 individuals, 2 males and 1 female, are believed to be trapped inside the vehicle, the reporter stated grimly. The camera zoomed in. A moment later, Mark was pulled from the wreckage, his face a mask of blood. He was frantically pointing back into the crushed car, screaming something I couldn't hear. 2 rescuers were struggling to extract someone from the mangled back seat. In the shaky footage, I could see Chloe, pinned between the seat and a large rock, her right leg a mangled, bloody mess. Dylan was pressed against a deployed airbag, but he appeared to be less severely injured. We can only save one at a time, a rescue captain shouted over the noise. Mark didn't hesitate for even a second. He pointed directly at his son. Save my son! Save my son first! When I heard his words, my eyes instinctively searched the screen for my daughter. In the bottom right corner of the frame, I saw Chloe's face. It was twisted into an expression of such pure, unadulterated hatred that it felt like her glare could burn through the screen. I switched off my phone. Lights out, a nurse called from the hallway. Lying there in the sterile hospital bed, I fell into a deep and peaceful sleep, more restful than any I had known in many years. When I awoke, the morning sun was streaming through the window. I turned on my phone and saw over 30 missed calls, all from Mark. The phone had barely finished booting up when it began to ring again. Sarah, where the hell have you been? Get your ass down to the main city hospital right now. Mark's enraged roar was so loud it made my eardrums ache. What happened? Why are you in the hospital? I asked, feigning confusion and ignorance. He didn't bother to explain, just continued to curse at me wildly. I had no patience for his tirade, so I simply asked for the room number and hung up. I took my time getting out of bed, ate a leisurely breakfast, and then hailed a taxi to the main hospital downtown. When I pushed open the door to the hospital room, the scene was grim. Mark was lying in the bed nearest the window, his left arm and left leg both encased in heavy casts, with his leg suspended in a traction device. My son, Dylan, sat on the edge of the bed next to him, engrossed in a game on his phone, a large bandage wrapped around his head. In the bed furthest into the room, Chloe's face was as white as the sheets, her right leg also in a cast and hoisted into the air. Mom! The moment Chloe saw me, she burst into tears. Dad chose Dylan. My leg is ruined. Tears streamed down her face, her voice choked with misery and a burning resentment. I walked over to her bed, forcing a look of shock onto my face and squeezed her hand. I even managed to produce a couple of tears. How could this have happened? If I had known, Mom would have let you beat me to death just to get you out of that car. My poor, poor daughter, I wailed, putting on a dramatic show of grief. Chloe's hand, which I was still holding, stiffened at my words. She must have been remembering the moment she had struck me with the badminton racket. I hid my internal sneer. Mark impatiently interrupted my performance. What are you crying about? The boy is the future of this family. Saving him was the obviously correct decision. Now go handle the transfer papers for me. This dump of a hospital doesn't even have a private bathroom. I looked at his casted arm and gently changed the topic. What did the doctor say about your injuries? Shattered, I'll be unable to work for at least half a year, Mark said, his face a mask of irritation. Damn it, the car is completely destroyed, and who knows who is going to pay for all these medical bills? Just a fracture. I felt a small pang of disappointment. I was about to offer some meaningless words of comfort when Chloe grabbed my hand and shrieked, Mom, don't listen to him. Take me to a better hospital, please. The doctor here said that if I go to a big city hospital, they can save my leg. The moment she said that, Mark flew into a rage. Bullshit! Hundreds of thousands of dollars just for your broken leg? You can forget about it, he roared, slamming his good hand down on the bed. Chloe's face went completely pale. She stared at Mark in disbelief, her lips trembling. Dad, they can fix my leg. Fix what? Mark spat, his voice booming through the small room. That money is for your brother's college education and to help him find a wife. You're just a girl. So what if you end up with a limp? You're just going to belong to another man's family one day anyway. At his cruel words, Chloe let out a choked sob and fresh tears poured down her cheeks. She stopped looking at Mark and turned her gaze to her brother. Sensing his sister's stare, Dylan, who had been completely absorbed in his phone, finally looked up. He offered a sheepish, uncomfortable smile. Yeah, sis. We can't spend all the family's money on just you, right? Chloe froze, the tears momentarily forgotten. Dylan, when you fell in the river when we were kids, I was the one who jumped in to save you. I held onto you with one arm and a tree root with the other until the adults came. Dylan just shrugged. So what? I think Dad is right. You're just going to get married and leave our family anyway. He immediately went back to his phone. Tears had completely soaked Chloe's face by now. She whipped her head toward me, her hands grabbing the corner of my shirt. Mom, I'm begging you, take me to a big hospital. I don't want to be a cripple for the rest of my life. I laughed coldly to myself, but on the outside, I gently stroked her hair. Of course, sweetie. Mom will make sure you get the treatment you need. I'll go ask the doctor about the transfer process right now. With that, I gently pushed her hand away and turned to leave the room. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mark's face turn ashen with rage. As I passed his bed, he suddenly lunged up, grabbed a handful of my hair, and slapped me hard across the face. Sarah, if you dare to touch my money, you'll see what happens. I'll kill you right here and now. Do you hear me? I staggered back, clutching my face, and deliberately cried out, Don't hit me, honey. We won't transfer her. We won't. Only then did Mark reluctantly let go. Through the gaps in my fingers, I saw a look of deep, bone-chilling hatred form in Chloe's eyes as she stared at her father. Later that night, I helped Chloe to the bathroom. In the cramped, sterile space, she suddenly lowered her voice to a whisper. Mom, divorce him. I feigned shock. Don't be silly, what are you talking about? She frantically pulled her phone out from the pocket of her hospital gown and showed me several videos. I have proof. Look, this is from last year when he was hitting you. I secretly recorded it. She swiped to the next video. And this one? It's a video of him at a hotel with his mistress. I recorded everything. I was genuinely surprised. My daughter knew all along that Mark was cheating. Why hadn't she ever told me? The coldness in my heart deepened. To think I had endured Mark's abuse for so long, all for the sake of these children. Chloe, my darling, good daughter, I said, gently hugging her. It's okay, sweetie. Mom will figure something out. I will not let you become a cripple. Can you send those videos to me? Chloe excitedly forwarded the videos to my phone. Mom, can you make sure that Mark leaves with nothing? She asked. I nodded. She tugged at my sleeve again, whining like a small child. Mom, after the divorce, you'll use all the money to fix my leg, right? I sneered internally, but put on a troubled expression for her benefit. But there's still your brother to consider. Mom, forget about that ungrateful brat, Chloe seethed. We both saw Dad cheating. I wanted to tell you, but he wouldn't let me. He said that's just how men are, and besides, you're not much to look at anyway. I pretended to think for a long time, finally nodding under Chloe's persistent pleading. Okay, we'll get a divorce, and we won't take your brother with us. All the money I get will be for you. Only then did a smile return to Chloe's face. Back in the room, I looked at the sleeping form of my son and started to formulate my next steps. Mark was snoring on his cot, completely oblivious to the fact that his beloved daughter had just become the sharpest weapon aimed directly at his back. The next morning, Mark was called away to the doctor's office. I walked to the hospital entrance, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number I hadn't called in a very long time. Mr. Peterson, it's me. About the divorce, I have new evidence. A week later, Mark and Dylan were discharged. Their injuries had not been severe. Mark had a simple fracture in his right arm, and Dylan had only a mild concussion. As they were leaving the hospital, Mark shot me a venomous glare. Tell Chloe she can forget about being transferred to another hospital, and when she gets out, she can forget about going to college too. She can go to some vocational school, learn a trade, and then get married. I said nothing in response. After seeing him off, I returned to Chloe's hospital room. Just as I entered, I overheard the doctor speaking to her. For now, we can only offer conservative treatment. You really should get to a major hospital for surgery as soon as possible. Otherwise, you are at very high risk of losing that leg. The doctor then turned and left the room. Hearing this, Chloe immediately started crying again. Mom, did you hear that? The doctor said if I don't get transferred soon, my leg will be useless. I walked over and tenderly wiped the tears from her cheeks. I know, honey. I want to get you to a better hospital as soon as I can, but your father has control of all the money. Then hurry up and divorce him. Chloe grabbed my wrist, her nails digging into my flesh. Mom, didn't you say you contacted a lawyer? I feigned hesitation. But no buts, Chloe screamed hysterically. Do you want to see me become a cripple for the rest of my life? I rushed to hug her and promised, Okay, I'll divorce your father right away. Then, right in front of her, I dialed my lawyer's number. 3 days later, the divorce papers were officially served to Mark. My lawyer informed me that the moment Mark received them, he had become so enraged he had almost attacked her. She warned me to be careful. I thanked her for her concern, my mind already spinning with another plan. Sarah, you're fucking dead! Mark stormed into the room on crutches while I was peeling an apple for my daughter. He yanked me up from the stool and raised his hand to strike me. You dare to divorce me? You think I won't kill you right now? I grabbed his fractured right arm. Ah! Mark howled in pain. Let go! I spun him around, my knee slamming hard into the small of his back. Mark stumbled and fell, and his casted arm crashed against the corner of the metal bed frame with a sickening crack. My arm! My arm! He wailed, curled up on the floor in agony. From her bed, Chloe watched him and let out a cold, chilling laugh. Serves you right. You're an abusive, cheating bastard. Mom should have divorced you years ago. Mark froze. He slowly turned his head to look at his daughter, a look of dawning realization spreading across his face. It was you. You worthless little bitch. You've been behind all of this. That's right, it was me. Chloe sneered, her face twisted with a sick pleasure. I'm sick and tired of you, you sexist old bastard. Mark's expression turned monstrous. He lunged toward the bed, his hands clamping around Chloe's neck. I'm going to strangle you today, you ungrateful little monster. Stop! I yelled, pretending to panic as I made a show of trying to pull him off her. I had already placed the fruit knife I was using on the corner of the nightstand, right next to Chloe's flailing hand. Chloe's face was turning a horrifying shade of purple. Her hands thrashed about wildly and her fingers brushed against the cool handle of the knife. Go to hell! A glint of steel flashed in the dim hospital light and Mark grunted in pain. Chloe frantically pulled the knife out and stabbed him again and again and again. You too. Mark staggered backward and then collapsed to the floor with a heavy thud. My hand trembling, I pressed the nurse call button, a cold smile touching my lips. It was perfect. The only fingerprints on the knife would be Chloe's. When the nurses and doctors rushed into the room, Chloe was still screaming hysterically. He was trying to kill me! He was trying to kill me! I rushed over and hugged her, whispering in her ear. Don't be afraid. Mom will be your witness. Chloe collapsed into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. The blood-soaked fruit knife clattered to the floor. Mom, I killed someone! What am I going to do? She cried, her entire body shaking. I patted her back, gently soothing her. Don't be scared. Mom will have a good talk with your father. You're still just a kid. He's a grown man. He's not going to hold a grudge, is he? Besides, you're his own daughter. He's not really going to let you go to prison, right? At my words, Chloe's face went deathly pale. But Mom, Mark was trying to strangle me. He'll definitely want me to go to jail. I cupped her tear-streaked face in my hands. Silly girl, why would Mom let you go to jail? Worst case, I'll agree to give your dad a bigger share of the money when we divorce. I bit my lip, feigning difficulty. Mom can borrow money to get your leg fixed. Mom? Chloe hugged me tighter, leaning on my shoulder and clutching my clothes like a drowning person clinging to a piece of driftwood. I'm going to check on your father, I said, gently pushing her away. I walked out of the room. The red light above the operating room was on. I dialed Dylan's number. Your father's been in an accident. Get to the hospital quickly. Half an hour later, Dylan rushed into the hallway completely out of breath. Mom, what happened to Dad? Your sister accidentally hurt your father, I said, letting my voice trail off. Why don't you go sit with her for a bit? Dylan's expression changed. How did she hurt him? They were arguing and she accidentally stabbed him, I said, being deliberately vague. He shoved me aside and stormed toward Chloe's room. I followed slowly behind, hearing a furious argument erupt from within. Are you crazy? How could you stab Dad? Dylan's roar was audible even through the closed door. He deserved it, Chloe screamed back. He abandoned me to save you, and then he tried to kill me. Bullshit. Dad would never try to kill you. You must have done something to piss him off again. I leaned against the wall, listening to the sounds of things being thrown and their vicious curses, a small smile playing on my lips. How familiar it all sounded. It was the same thing Dylan used to say whenever Mark beat me. Mom, you must have done something to make Dad mad. Now Chloe was getting a taste of her own medicine. I turned and walked away. 2 hours later, the light above the operating room finally went out. When Mark was wheeled out, I almost laughed out loud. His face was as gray as a corpse, with tubes protruding from his body everywhere. The family can go in to see him, but please don't wake him up, a nurse instructed as she wheeled him into the ICU. I stood by the bed, watching the numbers flicker on the various monitors. Dylan came in and stood guard over his father with me. Sometime in the middle of the night, Mark's eyelids fluttered. Mark, you're awake. I feigned delight, tears coming to my eyes on command. Mark's lips moved as if he was trying to say something. I had no patience to listen to him. I just grabbed his hand, my voice trembling. Honey, you can't call the police. Chloe is still so young. She didn't mean to do it. I'm begging you, please don't report her. Yes. Police, Mark rasped. Monster. Prison. I dropped to my knees beside the bed with a thud. For my sake, please don't call the police. She's our daughter, after all. Mark weakly shook his head. Just then, Dylan pulled out his phone. Dad, I'll call them right now. No, I lunged for the phone. She's your sister. Dylan shoved me away. When she was stabbing him, did she remember that he was her father? I collapsed onto the floor, watching as Dylan dialed 911, my heart soaring with a dark joy. The wail of sirens grew closer. 3 police officers walked briskly into the room, the one in the lead flashing his badge. Chloe Smith, we need you to come with us to assist in an investigation. Chloe trembled, clinging to my sleeve. I patted her hand reassuringly. Don't be afraid, Mom's here. But the police asked me to step out of the room. Chloe lay in her bed, shaking with fear. After the police finished their on-site investigation, the attending physician was called in for questioning. I heard them talking in low voices in the hallway. The victim has 7 stab wounds, 2 of which penetrated internal organs. However, considering the suspect's severe leg injury. Half an hour later, an officer announced their decision. Given the suspect's specific injuries, we've decided to release her on bail pending trial, but she will be required to wear an electronic ankle monitor. After taking their statements, the police left. When Dylan heard the news, he stormed into the room. What? That's it? He pointed at Chloe on the bed and roared, She stabbed Dad 7 times. He's still in the ICU. How is she just out on bail? She should be in jail. Dylan! Chloe shot up in bed. I should have let you drown in that river. With that, Dylan grabbed the water glass from the bedside table and was about to throw it. I rushed forward and slapped him hard across the face. Get out! He stumbled back, clutching his face, his eyes wide with disbelief. I spoke coldly. Make another scene and I'll stop paying your father's medical bills. Dylan's eyes widened. Mom, you... I cut him off. If your father can abandon my daughter, then I can abandon him. It's your choice, son. Do you want your father to live or do you want your sister in prison? Dylan's lips moved, but no words came out. He turned and slunk away. Chloe cried, asking, Mom, am I going to go to jail? I sighed, gently stroking her casted leg. If only your dad had died in that car crash, you wouldn't have a broken leg and none of this would have ever happened. Mom, she interrupted me suddenly, her voice strangely calm. If Dad dies now, will I still be sentenced? I feigned shock. What are you talking about? How would your dad die? Don't think such crazy things. Get some sleep. When your dad wakes up, Mom will try to talk to him again. Chloe said nothing more and turned over to lie down. I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. In the dead of night, I heard Chloe struggling to get out of bed. The soft, clinking sound of her metal crutches faded down the hallway. The next morning, a nurse rushed into the room. Her footsteps hurried. Mrs. Smith, your husband's heart has stopped. I followed the nurse to the ICU in a panic, just in time to see the doctor removing the EKG leads from Mark's chest. What happened? I asked, my voice choked with sobs. The attending physician shook his head grimly. Our preliminary assessment is a post-operative pulmonary embolism. I cried my eyes out as I had Mark's body sent to the morgue. When I returned to the room, Chloe was staring blankly at the ceiling. I sat on the edge of her bed and gently took her hand. Your father is dead. I'll have the police report withdrawn. I've already lost my husband. I can't lose my daughter, too. She slowly turned her head, a smile spreading across her pale face. So, Mom, does that mean my leg can be fixed now? Yes, I said, gently wiping the cold sweat from her brow. I'll contact the hospitals in the city right away. I've already looked into it. It'll cost about $50,000 to fix your leg. Even though we only have $30,000, Mom will borrow the rest for you. Mom, Dad's compensation money. Chloe pushed herself up eagerly. The payout from the car accident. I put on a look of sudden realization. Oh, that's right. The insurance company should be paying out a good amount, but your brother still has to go to school. Mom, when my leg is better, let's go have a talk with my dear brother about that compensation money, shall we? I nodded and returned her smile. thinking to myself that she would never get the chance to have that leg fixed. All right, I'll go talk to your brother again. You get some rest. I tucked the blanket around Chloe. Walking out of the room, I dialed Dylan's number. Son, where are you? I need to talk to you. The morgue, came the muffled reply. I'm staying with Dad. As the elevator descended, I composed my expression in the reflection of the metal doors. When I pushed open the door to the morgue, a wave of cold air mixed with the smell of disinfectant hit me. Dylan was kneeling beside a body covered with a white sheet. He whipped his head around at the sound of my footsteps. Mom, why won't you let me call the police? He asked, his voice hoarse. It was obviously her who killed Dad. I didn't answer. I gently lifted a corner of the white sheet. In the cold, fluorescent light, Mark's pale, bluish face looked like a moldy piece of frozen meat. The dark bruises from where our daughter had choked him were still visible on his neck. Dylan, I said, covering the body again. You knew your father was cheating, didn't you? His body stiffened. He stammered, How did you know? That's not important, I said, looking him straight in the eye. What's important is why you didn't tell me. Dylan's gaze darted around nervously. Dad said all men are like that, and besides, it's not like you'd ever dare to divorce him. So you and your father were lying to me together. My voice trembled with a perfectly timed sob. Now your father is gone. Are you going to let your sister be taken away too? Dylan was silent. I continued. I've already lost my husband. I don't want to lose a daughter too. I'm going to withdraw the police report. Dylan's anger was palpable. So what if Dad cheated? Does that mean he deserved to die? He shoved me aside, his face contorted with rage. I am definitely calling the police. With that, he bolted for the door. I took a few steps after him, then stopped, a small smile touching my lips. That evening, the same two police officers from before came to the hospital room with Dylan. The lead officer flashed his badge. Hello, ma'am. We need to verify a few things regarding the death of Mr. Mark Smith. Chloe grabbed my arm in terror. I patted her hand reassuringly and turned to the officer with a weary smile. Please, ask anything. Your son is accusing your daughter of premeditated murder, the officer said, opening his notebook. He also claims you were aware of it and covered for her. That's impossible, I said, shaking my head. Chloe was acting in self-defense. Her father was trying to strangle her. Mom! Dylan suddenly rushed in front of me. You know perfectly well that she's the one who killed Dad. A look of terror crossed Chloe's face. Tears instantly welled in my eyes. Dylan, how can you make up such a lie? I turned to the police, my hands trembling as I unbuttoned my collar to reveal the old bruises on my body. Look, this is from when her father hit me before. Chloe was only trying to protect me when she... The officers exchanged a look. The younger one suddenly asked, Chloe Smith, were you in the ICU at 3 a.m. last night? On the bed, Chloe's face went ghostly white. I rushed over and threw my arms around her. How could she go anywhere? Her leg is broken. Dylan, are you trying to destroy this entire family? Check the security footage, Dylan yelled. If you don't believe me, check the footage. The two officers looked at each other, then left to check the security cameras. Chloe was pale with fear. She beckoned to Dylan with her finger. Come here. What for? Dylan asked warily. Come here and I'll tell you why I killed Dad. Suspicious but curious, Dylan walked over and bent down to listen. I saw a cold smile form on Chloe's lips. She wrapped her arm around his neck and dug her fingers deep into her brother's eyes. Dylan, if you won't let me live in peace, then I won't let you either. Dylan let out a blood-curdling scream. By the time I managed to pull them apart, Dylan's eye sockets were empty and bloody. The police reviewed the security footage and confirmed that Chloe had, in fact, snuck into the ICU late at night. They took her away. As she was being led out, Chloe looked back at me, her eyes filled with a desperate pleading. I chased after them all the way to the elevator, crying out in a voice loud enough for everyone on the floor to hear, Mom will get you the best lawyer. Don't be afraid. The moment the elevator doors closed, I wiped away my tears. 3 months later, Chloe was indicted for first-degree murder. At the trial, I, as her grieving mother, expressed my complete shock and ignorance of the events. I even tearfully pleaded with the judge for leniency. But the evidence was irrefutable. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As for Dylan, his eyes had been gouged out, leaving him completely and permanently blind. With great sorrow, I placed him in a state-run long-term care facility, paying the absolute minimum required for his upkeep and leaving him to rot in his own self-made darkness. And as for me, I pocketed all of Mark's death benefits, the substantial insurance payout from the accident, and all of our family savings. I sold the house, deleted every contact from my phone, and took the money to a quiet, small town down south. There, I opened a little clothing boutique and began to live a peaceful, comfortable life. Every now and then, I think about my two children, one rotting away in a prison cell, the other slowly going mad in a nursing home. But the thoughts are fleeting. After all, they brought all of this on themselves.